The little girl had not made a sound in 11 months. That was the first thing Petra Kaminsky noticed when the man walked in with his daughter. Not his suit. Not the way the other parents instinctively straightened up when he entered the waiting room. Not even the fact that she'd seen his face on the cover of a business magazine in the break room just last week. She noticed the girl, small, maybe 7, brown pigtails and a pink backpack shaped like a hedgehog, and completely, utterly silent in a way that wasn't just shyness. It was the kind of silence that had weight to it. Petra had been working at Sunridge Children's Therapy Center in Ottawa for 3 years. She'd seen a lot of kids come through that waiting room. She knew the difference between a child who didn't want to talk and a child who had decided the world didn't deserve her words anymore. This one had decided. She watched the man, tall, exhausted in the particular way that money couldn't fix, guide the girl to a chair near the window. He crouched down to her level and signed something. His signing was stiff, careful, the kind you learned from a YouTube tutorial at 2 in the morning because you didn't know what else to do. The girl watched his hands, then looked away at the window. He sat down beside her and stared at the floor. Petra went back to the front desk where she was supposed to be sorting intake forms. She sorted 0 intake forms. She kept looking over. His name, she would learn later, was Elliot Hargrove, 41 years old. Founder of a construction materials company that had apparently revolutionized something about sustainable concrete. She could never remember the exact detail. He had offices in Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver. He had a daughter named Lily who had stopped speaking in November after her mother died, not because anything was medically wrong, because grief in a 7-year-old sometimes didn't come out as crying. Sometimes it came out as silence. That first day, Petra had no idea about any of that. She just knew the girl was watching a pigeon on the windowsill with the focused attention of someone who found pigeons significantly more interesting than the adults around her. When the receptionist called them in for their session with the art therapist, the man stood up and reached for his daughter's hand. The girl didn't take it. She just stood up on her own and walked toward the hallway. He followed half a step behind, hands now empty at his sides. Petra watched them go and felt something pull at her chest that she couldn't quite name. She didn't see them again for 2 weeks. Her job at Sunridge was administrative, intake coordination, scheduling, the occasional patient transport when the regular driver was sick. She wasn't a therapist. She had a certificate in social services from Algonquin College, and 3 years of experience and a genuine belief that the work mattered, even the parts that involved faxing insurance companies at 4:30 on a Friday. The second time Elliot Hargrove and Lily came in, it was a Thursday afternoon, and Petra was covering the front desk because the receptionist had gone home with a migraine. Lily walked in first this time, 3 steps ahead of her father, and went directly to the corner of the waiting room where someone had set up a small table with watercolor paints and paper. Without asking anyone, she sat down and picked up a brush. Petra watched, surprised. She glanced at Elliot, who looked equally surprised, and something else, something fragile. She doesn't usually. He started, then stopped. "It's okay," Petra said. "The supplies are there for the kids." Lily had already mixed a color on the palette, something between gray and blue. She began painting what looked like a bird. Elliot stood near the desk, not quite knowing where to put himself. He was the kind of man who in a boardroom probably knew exactly where to put himself. Here he was just a father watching his daughter breathe, afraid to move in case it broke something. "The pigeon," Petra said quietly. He looked at her. "Sorry? 2 weeks ago, she was watching a pigeon on that windowsill." Petra nodded toward the window. "She's painting it." Elliot turned to look at his daughter's paper. The gray-blue bird was taking shape. Small, round, a little lopsided, but unmistakably a pigeon. He looked at it for a long moment. "She hasn't painted anything since," he cleared his throat. "In a while. Would you like some coffee?" Petra asked. "The machine's terrible, but it's hot." He looked at her like she'd said something unexpectedly kind. "Sure," he said. "Thank you." She got him a coffee in a paper cup with a maple leaf on it, because that was the only kind they had, and he held it with both hands and they stood near the desk in a companionable silence, watching Lily paint her pigeon while the afternoon light came through the window and fell across the paper in a way that made the gray-blue look almost silver. By the 6th visit, Petra knew that Lily loved pigeons specifically because her mother had kept a list of every pigeon she'd ever seen in the city, each one with a name and a small sketch in a notebook. She knew that Elliot had found the notebook 3 months after his wife's death in a coat pocket and had nearly fallen apart in the hallway of his own house. She knew that Lily had seen him find it, and that was the last day either of them had talked about it. She knew all of this because Elliot talked to her while Lily painted. He didn't talk to her the way people usually talk to front desk staff. Brief, functional, barely making eye contact. He talked to her the way people talked when they had been carrying something alone for so long that they'd forgotten what it felt like to put it down, even for a moment. Petra listened. That was something she was genuinely good at. She'd been told her whole life that she had a face people trusted, which she'd always taken as a mild compliment but which, here, felt like an actual skill. She learned that his wife, Colette, had died of an aneurysm on a Tuesday morning, that Lily had been at school, that Elliot had been in a meeting in Toronto and had taken a flight home that felt like it lasted 1,000 years, that Lily had not cried at the funeral, that she had held his hand the entire time and not cried, and that somehow that had been harder to watch than anything else. He learned, because she told him, because it felt strange not to reciprocate, that Petra had grown up in Sudbury, that she'd moved to Ottawa at 22, that she'd chosen social services because her younger brother had gone through a rough stretch in his teens, and the one person who'd actually helped him was a youth worker named Gerald, who drove a terrible car and listened like it was the most important job in the world. "That's why you're good at this," Elliot said one afternoon. "I'm not a therapist," she said. "I just answer phones and schedule appointments." "That's not what I meant," he said. She didn't ask him what he meant. She had a feeling she knew, and it made her look at her computer screen. The thing with Lily happened on a Thursday in February, and it caught everyone off guard, including Lily. Petra had been eating lunch at her desk, which she wasn't supposed to do, but the break room smelled like someone had microwaved fish when Lily came out of her session 15 minutes early. Dr. Albright, the art therapist, followed behind her looking thoughtful rather than alarmed, so Petra didn't panic. Lily walked directly to the painting table. Today's paper already had a pigeon on it. She'd clearly been working on it in session, but she picked up a fresh sheet and started again. Faster this time, more certain. Petra watched her hands. After a moment, she got up from her desk and came to sit across the table. "Can I try?" she asked. Lily looked at her. This was, Petra would realize later, the first time Lily had made sustained eye contact with her. Lily considered the request with the gravity of someone being asked something important, then pushed the blue paint toward her. Petra picked up a brush. She was not, by any stretch, a painter. She painted something that was technically a bird but more accurately resembled a small anxious cloud. Lily looked at it. Something moved across her face, quick, almost invisible. Then she reached over and added 2 stick legs to Petra's cloud bird. Petra laughed. Lily's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was the shadow of one, the memory of a muscle remembering what it was for. Elliot was standing in the hallway when it happened. He had come to pick Lily up early and had stopped when he saw them at the table. Petra didn't notice him until she looked up. He was pressed against the doorframe like he needed it to hold him up. His hand was over his mouth. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with it at the same time. When Lily finally turned and saw him, she picked up her painting, the pigeon, not Petra's cloud, and walked over and held it out to him. He took it with both hands, the way you take something that might break. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet and a little wrecked. "It's beautiful, Bug." And then, small, private, almost missed, Lily leaned her head against his arm. He closed his eyes. Petra looked back at the table and straightened the paint tubes and gave them a moment that wasn't hers to witness. His sister-in-law's name was Cressida. Petra met her in the parking lot on a Wednesday in March, which was not, in retrospect, a warning she could have read in advance. Cressida Hargrove. She'd kept the name after her brother's death, which was Colette's brother, not Elliot's. It was complicated. Was standing beside a silver car when Petra came out for her lunch break. She had the particular groomed look of someone who put significant effort into appearing effortless, and she smiled at Petra in the way of someone who had already decided something. "You're the girl at the front desk," she said. "Petra, I am," Petra said, which was all she could really say to that. "Elliot talks about you." The smile didn't move. "He mentions you when he calls to check on Lily after sessions. He says you've been very helpful." "That's my job," Petra said. "Of course," Cressida said. "Of course it is." She said it in a tone that made the words mean something else entirely, and then she got in her silver car and drove away, and Petra stood in the parking lot with her sandwich and felt the back of her neck prickle. She told herself she was overreacting. She was not overreacting. 3 weeks later, Elliot didn't come in for Lily's Thursday session. He sent a car instead, which he'd never done before. The driver, a young man who clearly had been told to say very little, dropped Lily off and sat in the waiting room looking at his phone. Lily came out of her session and looked around the waiting room and found Petra at the front desk. She walked over. She stood at the desk. She picked up the small succulent that sat next to Petra's monitor. Petra had named it Gerald, and looked at it carefully, then put it back. "He'll be back next week," Petra said, because she didn't know what else to say and because Lily seemed to be asking something without having the words for it. Lily nodded once. Then she went and sat down to wait for the driver to notice she was done. Petra stared at Gerald for a long time after they left. She found out what had happened from Elliot's assistant, who called to reschedule 2 appointments and mentioned, with the careful neutrality of someone who had been briefed on what to say, that Mr. Hargrove had been dealing with a personal matter. The personal matter, as Petra pieced together over the following week from a news article she absolutely should not have searched for but did, was that someone had sent Elliot photographs. Photographs of Petra in conversation with a man outside a coffee shop near her apartment building. The man was her neighbor, a retired civil servant named Donald who was 73 and fed the birds in the park every morning and had asked Petra once to help him figure out his email. The photographs were captioned in an accompanying email from an anonymous address with the suggestion that she had been seen meeting with a representative from a competing therapy center that was trying to poach Sunridge's corporate client relationships. None of that was real. But the photographs were real, and out of context they looked like a meeting. And apparently Elliot had been shown them by someone who had presented them as evidence of something. Petra sat with this information for a day. Then she picked up her phone and called Elliot Hargrove's direct number, which she had because she scheduled his daughter's appointments and sometimes needed to reach him about logistics. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Petra," he said. His voice was careful. "Donald is 73 years old," she said. "He feeds pigeons in Dundonald Park every Sunday and he can't figure out how to attach a PDF to an email. I have been helping him with that. That is the full extent of our professional relationship." A silence. "I don't," he started. "I know what someone told you," she said. "I don't know who, but I know what. And I need you to know that it isn't true, because whatever you decide to do with that information is up to you. But I won't let a lie just sit there unchallenged. I'm not built that way." Another silence. Longer. "How did you find out?" he asked. "Your assistant rescheduled your appointments, and I'm not an idiot." A breath on the other end of the line, almost a laugh. "No," he said. "You're really not. I also want you to know," she continued, because she'd rehearsed this part more than the rest and she was going to say it, "that whoever sent you those photographs wanted you to pull Lily from her sessions. Or wanted you to think something about me that would make you do that. I don't know which one they care about more, but I think you should ask yourself that question." She heard him exhale. "Petra," he said, "you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." She hung up. Her hands were shaking slightly. She put them flat on her desk and looked at Gerald the succulent and thought, with some intensity, about Gerald the youth worker from Sudbury who had never, as far as she knew, found himself in this kind of situation. Elliot was back the following Thursday. He came 20 minutes before Lily's session, which he'd never done before. He walked in, nodded to the receptionist and came directly to Petra's desk. She looked up. "It was Cressida," he said. "She hired someone to follow you. She's been trying to find a reason for me to move Lily's care to a different center, one she has a financial stake in." Petra absorbed this. "How long have you known?" "Since Monday. I had someone look into the email address." He paused. "I also called Donald. You called my neighbor. He spoke very highly of you. He also told me about the PDF problem, in some detail." Despite everything, she felt something loosen in her chest. "Cressida has been removed from any role in Lily's care decisions," Elliot said, "and from several other things she had involvement in that she shouldn't have." He said it in the flat tone of someone who had made a difficult decision and was done revisiting it. "I've spoken to the director here. I want to apologize for not calling you immediately, for letting doubt make me slow when you deserved better." Petra looked at him. He was standing in the middle of the waiting room with his coat still on, and he looked like a man who had come here with a purpose and was seeing it through with whatever resolve he had left. "You don't have to apologize," she said. "And I want to do it in person, which I'm doing, so." She almost smiled. "Okay," she said. Apology received. He stood there another moment, like he was deciding something. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked. "Not as an apology. The apology is separate, as something else." The waiting room was not empty. There were 2 other families in it, both of whom were pretending very hard to look at their phones. "Your daughter's session is in 20 minutes, Petra said. "After then." She looked at him. He looked back. He had the specific look of a man who had spent 11 months being afraid of the wrong things and had recently, painfully recalibrated. "After," she said. Lily came out of her session that day holding a painting she hadn't made in session. She'd been working on it at the table the last few visits, piece by piece, without anyone asking her about it or making it into something bigger than it was. She walked up to Petra's desk and put it down in front of her. It was a pigeon, but not a plain one. This one had a small figure beside it, small, curly-haired, holding a paintbrush. And next to the figure was what was clearly an extremely terrible bird painting, all round and cloud-shaped with 2 stick legs. Lily pointed at the cloud bird, then at Petra. Petra laughed, sudden and real. Lily smiled. Not the shadow of one this time. Not the memory of a muscle. A real smile, bright and slightly self-satisfied. The smile of someone who had made a joke and knew it was a good one. Elliot, standing a few feet away, made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Petra looked at him. He was looking at his daughter with an expression that was going to undo her completely if she kept looking at it, so she looked back at the painting instead. "I'm keeping this," she told Lily. Lily gave one firm nod, like that had always been the plan. Petra carefully unpinned the January staff schedule from the corkboard behind her desk. No one needed it anymore, and pinned the painting there instead. The pigeon and the cloudbird with stick legs in the place where a spreadsheet used to be. It looked, she thought, significantly better. 3 months later, Elliot stood at a small podium at the Sunridge Spring fundraising gala and spoke about what the center had meant to his family. And he said Lily's name, and he said Colette's name too, and his voice didn't break, though it came close. He spoke about how healing wasn't linear, and how sometimes it looked like watercolors on a Wednesday afternoon, and sometimes it looked like a pigeon on a windowsill, that a 7-year-old decided to paint instead of letting grief take the whole world away. Petra was at a table near the back because she was staff, and staff sat near the back. Lily was sitting next to her. At some point during the speech, without fanfare, Lily reached over and took Petra's hand. Petra held it. On the podium, Elliot glanced out at the room and found them, the way she'd noticed he'd learned to do, the particular reflex of a man who needed to know where his people were before he could breathe evenly. And something in his face settled. He kept talking, his voice steadied, and across the room, and through the careful months that followed, and through the gradual, unannounced accumulation of mornings and dinners and Sunday walks in Dundonald Park where Donald fed his pigeons, and Lily named each one with great seriousness. And Elliot held Petra's hand the way you hold something you are still a little amazed to have found. Through all of it, Petra would sometimes think about the particular shape of a cloud bird with stick legs, and how the things that connect us are almost never the impressive ones. They're the honest ones.